everyone. This is Chapter 9, Drug Society and Human Behavior. And we're going to be talking about our old favorite drug, alcohol, today. And you guys already know that in 1319 we spend pretty much the whole semester on alcohol and touching on some other drugs too. So I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on the ins and outs of it because we could use it otherwise. Anyway, I'm going to talk about that today, and we're going to get right on it, and it'll probably be a shorter lecture, and I'll just share my book with you rather than the PowerPoint at this time. So. Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. It's an ancient drug. It's probably the oldest drug that man has been using in large quantities worldwide. It's mentioned in the Holy Bible. It's mentioned in the Koran. It's mentioned in most of the religious texts worldwide. Human beings have had experience with this for a very, very long time. Alcohol is a naturally occurring drug. It's produced by a process that's known as fermentation. And fermentation is the action of yeast on sugar in the presence of water, by which alcohol is produced as a waste product. In other words, the little yeast organisms eat the sugar and poop the alcohol. The most natural, the highest concentration of alcohol found in under natural circumstances is around 15%, 14 to 15%, 15 at the outside. Although there has been some research done on super yeast. It's kind of like yeast bugs on steroids that might be able to produce 20% alcohol, but that's not a common thing. The reason for this is that yeast organisms lived by a basic law of biology that we all have to follow. And that law is that an organism cannot long survive in its own waste. So as the alcohol levels increase, the yeast organisms decrease because they die at 15% and they produce no more. Standard content for alcohol, fermented alcohol, is around 12%. That's generally what you get for wine and beers and ales and that kind of thing. Anything that rots produces alcohol. You can get alcohol from plants of all sorts. You can get, if it rots, it produces alcohol. You can get roadkill alcohol from your squash possum on the side of the road. I wouldn't drink it, but it would be there. And some alcohols let me rephrase that. All alcohols are toxic to human beings. Ethyl alcohol is the least toxic one that we have, so we can drink more of it without dying. But some of the other alcohols will do really bad things to us if we drink them. Butyl alcohol and isopropanol and all of that kind of good stuff. You may hear people talking about proof when they're talking about distilled beverages. Distillation, it produces a much higher alcohol content in distilled beverages than you'll get in fermented beverages. What you do when you distill something is basically you take your fermented mash, whatever that may be, and you apply heat to it. And you can make the mash from corn, potatoes, rye, tomatoes. It doesn't matter because you're not going to taste what it's made from on the other end. And you put it in a container and you apply heat to it. Well, alcohol vaporizes at a much lower degree than water does. So that when the condensate rises, when the steam rises off of the heated solution, it's alcohol, and it goes up into a vent where it's collected and cooled, and it reliquefies after the gas is trapped, and it reliquefies and drips out, flows out on the other end as grain neutral spirits. This is almost pure alcohol. You can't have pure alcohol unless you're working under hermetically sealed conditions, because alcohol sucks water. It dilutes itself when it's exposed to the atmosphere. And so on the other end, you have grain neutral spirits, and it's these grain neutral spirits that become the raw material for whiskey, vodka, gin, etc. And that's where it gets kind of hinky. And once you create these products, whiskey, gin, vodka, etc., then you have to concern yourself with alcohol, percentage of alcohol in the solution. So that if you have 50% alcohol in your whiskey, it's 100 proof, because proof is twice the percentage. So anytime you want to know what the percent of alcohol is, you look at the proof. It's 90 proof. That means it's 45%. You look at the percentage, it's 45. That means it's 90 proof. So you can go both ways with it. The percentage of alcohol by volume is a measure that you will get on your bottle, on your label, so that you'll know when you take it what you're getting. The alcoholic beverage industry can be kind of tricky when you're trying to understand it. The drug, the active agent that's in the alcohol products, whether it's beer, wine, ale, whiskey, whatever, is ethyl alcohol. That is the drug that we're ingesting, ethanol. And ethanol produces certain effects on us because it's a central nervous system depressant. There are stronger versions of ethanol. The higher the proof, the stronger the solution. The stronger the solution, the harder it will hit you. But all of it will do the same thing. All of it, the intoxication methodology is the same across the board. If you want to make Jack Daniels, a very popular whiskey, if you've ever had Jack Daniels, it's got kind of a woody smell to it, and a little bit of a woody taste. And that's because, you've seen the commercials with Mila Kunis, she's branding her keg that's got her Jack Daniels in it. She's putting it away for 7 years to come and get it later when it's really Jack Daniels. Well, what they do is they take a wooden keg and they take a torch, a heating torch, it's called a rosebud, and they scour the inside of that keg with it to where it's burnt on the inside. Then they take grain neutral spirits and water and they mix it to the solution that they want. When you take grain neutral spirits and mix it with water, you wind up with vodka, is what that is, water and alcohol. Interesting, huh? And then you pour this water and alcohol into the keg and you seal it up and you let it set for 7 years. And when you open it up, you have an alcohol solution that's a certain proof that tastes a little bit like the oak barrel that it was soaked in. It tastes a little bit like burnt wood because that's the flavor that it absorbed. if you don't want to go to that trouble, just mix water into it and grind neutral spirits together till you get the proper solution that you want, the proper proof that you want, and you call it vodka, which is a Russian word. It means water, which is probably pretty good because that's mostly what vodka is water. And if that's the case, how can one vodka be better than the other vodka? Good question. It's just alcohol and water. So you can chew on that for a while if you want to. If you want gin, you take that vodka that you made, and instead of putting it in an oaken barrel, you strain it through a gin head. And that gin head's got juniper berries in it. And the juniper berries flavor it. And it comes out on the other end tasting a little bit like pine sol. Having a nice woodsy, out in the woods smell to it, evergreen smell. And then you've got something like Beefeaters or Gilbey's. If you want sloe gin, that's SLOE, by the way, you filter that alcohol through a gin head with wild plums, which is what a sloe is, SLOE. A lot of people think sloe gin means SLOW, and it's not SLOW gin, it's SLOE gin. There's nothing slow about it. It will hit you like a freight train. The alcohol industry is pretty creative in selling stuff. Beer is a fermented beverage. Usually a beer in America is around 5% alcohol, somewhere in there. And it's a relatively weak solution as far as the proof goes. And if you've drunk beer, you know it doesn't burn you. It doesn't give you the sensation that you get from drinking more distilled liquors. However, beers are beer in America has got a bunch of preservatives and stuff in it. It's not like European beer. A friend of mine from a long time ago, Marianne Morville, who was from the Netherlands, said it didn't matter which brand of American beer you drank because it was all drawn from the same horse. And she was pretty right about that. If you drink European beer, you can taste the yeast in it. It's got a bread flavor to it. So does home brewed beer. My father used to make home brew, and you have to kind of carefully turn the bottle upside down and kind of shake it up a little bit, mix it before you drink it because the yeast was pretty heavy in it. American beer, the yeast is removed before they pack it because if you don't remove the yeast, it will spoil the beer. It will go sour on you. And they add carbon and they add preservatives so that it has all kinds of chemicals in it to cause it to suds and to not spoil and good stuff like that. Talking about the largest selling beer brands here. Bud Light is one of the top sellers. Coors Light, Budweiser, Miller Lite, Corona Extra, all of those. Wine is one of humankind's oldest beverages. Wine is from grapes, actually. And there are wines that are made across the world in Spain and France and Britain and the United States, places like that where they have vineyards. And some of the regions where the wine is grown, like Clairvaux, France, have real reputations. It's wine country. They're named after the grapes that they're produced from. You have red wines and you have white wines. And once you've let your wine ferment, you have various proofs of that wine. Again, usually up to around an average of 12%. And that's the strongest wines that you get out of there, out of that process. Which may cause some of you to ask, if that's the case, what about Mogan David 2020, which is a 20% wine? How do you get a 20% wine if the yeast organisms die around 12% and the average alcohol content of a fermented beverage in the United States is 12? Well, I'm really glad you asked that. And the answer to that is grain-neutral spirits. Remember that alcohol that's distilled to the point that is almost pure? And when you have that type of alcohol, you can't tell what it was made from. It doesn't taste like corn. It doesn't taste like potatoes. It doesn't taste like grapes. It doesn't taste like wheat or barley or any of the common elements that alcohol is fermented from. That's why it's a grain neutral. You can't tell. So you just add grain neutral spirits to your fermented beverage, which is 12%. You add 8 more percent of alcohol to that solution with grain neutral spirits, and then you have Mogan David 2020. And it's what we call a reinforced wine, a reinforced beverage. Cool, huh? Anyway, that's how that works. We talked extensively in 1319 about alcohol use and the alcohol problem, and we've talked about it some in here. Alcohol use is not a problem for most of the people who consume it in the United States of America, because honestly, most people who drink are pretty responsible drinkers, and they don't get carried away. They don't over-imbibe on a regular basis. They don't drive drunk, beat their wives, shoot their husbands, that kind of thing. Some do, but they're a relatively small percentage. And some folks who drink, again, a small percentage, are in trouble from day one with alcohol use. In America, when we began having problems with drinking, or when, let me say that social agitators began to advocate for changes of the law to deal with the problematic people who drink, their goal was initially to appeal to reason. So that the temperance movement did not start out militantly. It started out as a movement that would try to persuade people to not overindulge, to drink responsibly, know when to say when. Remember that campaign? That's a temperance campaign. But temperance didn't really work out, and over time, it got more militant, and it moved toward the area of prohibition. And to prohibit something means to forbid it. So alcohol use was beginning, and the legislation was passed in 1919, which was the 18th Amendment, went into effect in 1920, and for 13 years, alcohol use was prohibited in the United States. It was forbidden to manufacture, distribute, and consume or possess these illegal substances in the United States. Of course, you could go to state-run liquor stores, and under certain conditions, you could get alcohol dispensed to you. And you could still use your alcohol in religious services. They didn't slap the wine out of Jewish people's hands or out of the Catholics' hands when they're doing communion or using wine in religious ceremonies. When the country was dry, though, it wasn't really dry. Alcohol consumption did not cease, nor did alcohol production. It just went underground. and people would go to speakeasies in order to drink. And the speakeasy was the Roaring Twenties version of the crack house. You went there and you got a drink and gambled and whatever it was you were going to do. Prohibition worked on one hand, though, because instances of alcohol-related deaths began to drop. For instance, during Prohibition, there weren't as many people getting killed on the roads during Prohibition, while alcohol-related deaths did increase somewhat, but deaths from alcohol dependence did not. Toward the end, alcohol dependence and alcohol-related deaths were lower than they were when Prohibition started, and they're on the increase again. In Texas, we live in Harris County, and right now today, Harris County is the most dangerous place in the United States to be in terms of alcohol-related car crashes, alcohol-related injuries in car crashes, and alcohol-related deaths from car crashes. But it wasn't always like that. Prohibition was repealed in 1933, and we saw statutory age limits were applied across the country, and each state set its own age limit. Some states set it at 18, some at 19, some at 20, some at 21. Now, right this minute, statutory age limit for consuming alcohol in the United States is 21 across the board. And the reason it's 21 across the board is because of taxes. When some years ago, I think it was during the Bush administration, it may have been Clinton though, I think it was Bush, they set a statutory limit and connected it to highway taxes, infrastructure funds. And the way it works is all 50 states kick money into the infrastructure fund, and our state taxes go into federal coffers, and they collect all of these taxes, and then they redistribute them back to us in a more fair manner. So I'm making air quotation marks with my fingers. You can't see that. Fair manner. But what they did, the legislators, the federal legislators, they decided you can set your drinking age at any age you want to set it, 18, 15, we don't care, but unless it's 21, we're keeping your infrastructure funds. We're not distributing money to your state if you have a drinking age under 21. What we would call that in business is kind of extortion. If they were doing it, if you or I were doing that to people we were loaning money to, for instance. It wouldn't be legal for us to do, but the government can do it. So that's how it got to be 21. Speaking of 21, that's the amendment that was passed to repeal Prohibition. It was the 21st Amendment. And it just said, the 18th Amendment no longer applies. Thank you very much. And then people started setting the statutory limits. After Prohibition was repealed, they did not necessarily, it didn't apply everywhere. There were and are still places in the country. Most of the country's wet, but not all of the country. There are still dry places in the United States, dry cities, dry counties, where you can't find anything to drink, not legally anyway, but there's usually some booze there somewhere. Okay. They're talking about taxes on alcohol here, and I'm not going to belabor that. But the alcohol industry has a full regiment of lobbyists who look out for their interests, who make sure that they're still able to advertise on TV and in the press and on the internet and stuff like that. These same people are working real hard to make sure that their taxes are not increased. And the last significant increase on the alcohol industry occurred when Ronald Reagan was president, in case you're wondering. Cultural influences play a lot into who drinks and what they drink and how much they drink and when they drink, etc. And drinking patterns are associated with certain groups of people sometimes, like my mother's people, the folks I come from on my mother's side, the Irish people, the McCaddens. We have been the butts of many, many jokes about drinking. Two Irishmen walk out of a bar. Hey, it could happen, What do you call a 7-course Irish meal? A 6-pack and a potato, right? And God invented whiskey so the Irish couldn't conquer the world, and so far it's working. So we caught a lot of flack for that. When the Irish immigrants came here in the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s, to build railroads and become cops and things like that, they got involved in the logging industry up north, and they lived, and they had these places where they skidded trees that they cut down to the main highway and loaded them on trucks, or skidded them down to the water and dumped them in the water to float them downstream. And these pathways became known as skid roads. That's where you were liable to find a bunch of drunken Irishmen. It was down on Skid Road, which later became Skid Row. You sent the Black Mariahs out to pick them up, to pick up all the drunken paddies that were laying around on the side of Skid Row. When you were packing them into the wagon, it became known as a paddy wagon, because that's what you put in it, drunk paddies, right? Just a little bit of cultural enlightenment there, guys. Depending on your religion, where you live in the country, what the cultures were in the old world, where your people came from, what the regional differences are in the nation that you live in, drinking patterns are different. We live in an area down here, up through here, that's known as the Bible Belt. And in the Bible Belt, down through the central and midwestern states, southern states, you have a lot of Protestants. And where Protestants reign, you don't see a lot of drinking, because a lot of our faiths forbid it. I was raised in a Baptist home, so I was taught that drinking, any kind of drinking, any amount of drinking, is a sin. And my mother always preached to me that if you go see God with liquor on your breath, that's it. There's no way into heaven, man. It's all over at that time. That was the faith that and the kind of things that I was taught. So where you find heavy Protestantism, you usually don't find a lot of heavy drinking. Where you find, as Father Martin says, the late Father Martin, where you find 4 Catholics, you usually find a 5th. It depends. If you're in a part of the world where Islam is the norm, the Quran expressly forbids drinking. You cannot do alcohol, if you're a practicing Muslim. It's a sin. Well, let me put it this way. It's a sin to do alcohol if you're a practicing Muslim. So it's kind of like being a Baptist, right? But other parts of the world, it's not a big deal. If you're a Jew, wine is a gift from God to gladden the hearts of man, you know. If you're a Baptist, it's demon rum. It's the work of the devil. So different perspectives. There are gender differences. Males are a little more likely to drink than females, although women are also pretty prone to drink. Alcohol affects men differently than it affects women. Men tend to have drinking problems to a larger extent than women do, although it is a problem. Drinking among college students is a problem too, because drinking among college students, and in a traditional sense, and I don't think it's as bad as Lee College as it is at some universities, because most of our students, they come to the school in the morning and they go home to their home at night. They live in the area. They grew up in the area very often, and they don't live in dorms and that sort of thing. But when you go away to college and you live in a dorm, then you get involved in the Greek life maybe, and start partying and having a swell time, and people binge drink. And a lot of problems can result because people binge drink. I'm putting together right now a presentation that I'll be including in the courses around in another class around the film The Hunting Ground, which is a documentary that was produced in 2015, and it's about sexual violence and sexual assault on college campuses. But I was reviewing that again the other day, and they've interviewed a lot of people who were victimized on campus, and that's a real problem. And most of these young ladies who are telling their stories, it was shocking. And I'm not blaming victims. Don't get me wrong, but it's shocking to me how many of their stories began. I was at a party and I drank too much. I was at a party and we were all drinking. I was at a party and someone put something in my drink. These kinds of stories. So alcohol use isn't a problem for everyone on campus. I mean, there are people who go to school and take care of business and don't drink at all. And there are people who go to school and drink reasonably and responsibly and don't go to binge parties and things like that. But for some people, again, it's a problem. And in cases of sexual assault, it's a real problem. We have Rohypnol and GHB and all of these other products out there that are known as date rape drugs. But alcohol is the old standby as far as date rape drugs go. Alcohol, once you put it in your mouth, you begin to absorb it. It absorbs through your lips, gums, tongue, esophagus, etc., and so forth. Alcohol needs no digestion to be absorbed. As long as it's in your stomach, it's not doing a whole hell of a lot. But when there's some of it absorbed through there, of course, but you have alcohol dehydrogenase, which is a metabolic enzyme that breaks it down, and that process starts in the stomach. But when the stomach contents are dumped, when the pyloric valve opens and dumps the contents of the stomach into the intestines, that's where you start getting your real absorption right. Alcohol is primarily absorbed through the lower intestine, and it's distributed through the body by a process that's known as diffusion. And diffusion is like that commercial on TV with the quicker picker-upper, the Bounty towel, where there's water spilled on the counter and the lady puts a corner of the napkin in it and the water kind of crawls up the paper towel, and that's how the quicker picker-upper works. That's also kind of how alcohol works diffusively in the body. As far as cells are concerned, alcohol goes to where alcohol is not. It migrates through the system. There is a relationship between blood alcohol concentration and alcohol intake is relatively easily understood. Your body usually absorbs roughly 3/4 of an ounce of alcohol in an hour, normally. For some, it's a little lower for some, maybe a half ounce, a little higher for others, maybe an ounce, but in that general ballpark. So if you have one drink today at 5 o'clock at the cocktail hour, and you're visiting with your friends, and then you have another drink at 5:45, you stack a little bit of alcohol. If you have, it will be almost metabolized by the time you take that second drink. So if you have a drink at 5, have one at 5:45, and then you leave the bar at 6:45, you should be good to go. You shouldn't have a BAC that would be problematic for you if the policeman made you blow in a breathalyzer or drew your blood. You should have a blood alcohol concentration below 0.5, below 0.5 rather, or around that. If you drink more than one drink in an hour, then these dosages stack. If you have 3 drinks in an hour, then at the end of that hour, you'll still have 2 drinks active in your system because your body will just have metabolized 1. And then you have 3 more drinks in the next hour, and at the end of the second hour, you have 4 drinks in your system because your body has only metabolized 1. And so there's a cumulative effect, an additive effect. These drinks stack up on top of one another. There's a blood alcohol concentration amount of drinks per weight, per male, per female, etc., and it gives you an idea of how that works out. In Texas and in the rest of the United States, a blood alcohol concentration of 0.08% constitutes legal intoxication. And that doesn't mean that everybody's equally drunk at that level. It just means that blood alcohol level constitutes legal intoxication. It used to be 0.10, but a politically active group known as Mothers Against Drunk Driving worked very hard and very diligently to get the legal intoxication level lowered by 0.02 of a point, which is fairly significant in terms of this. If you are 0.08 can appear different for different people, and this is where physiological tolerance and behavioral tolerance intersect, by the way. As I drink more and learn to drink more, 0.08 at the beginning of my drinking career may look pretty traumatic. I may be slurring my words and staggering around a little bit, or doing other inappropriate things. But as I drink more, as I get accustomed to it, as my body becomes accustomed to it, then I don't do that anymore. And as a customary and fairly frequent, fairly all the time drinker, 0.08 appearance-wise doesn't look like much. If I only drink every once in a while, 0.08 looks pretty intoxicated. So either way, if I blow 0.08, whether I appear to be intoxicated or whether I don't, that's enough for a DUI, or an impaired driving ticket. So you of course want to avoid that. What else was I going to say about that? Oh, that's another reason to be careful on the holidays. New Year's Eve is probably, or the time around midnight on New Year's Eve is a terrible time to be out and about because it's amateur night. And there are people who don't drink much and don't drink often, but they're all drinking tonight, and they're all driving because they don't have the good sense not to. You want to be careful for them. Anytime you're on the road, again in Harris County, particularly, you can assume that count the cars: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, drunk. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, drunk. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, drunk, or otherwise impaired with drugs, and that's about the ratio that we have around here. So metabolism, alcohol begins to be broken down in the stomach, and I don't remember, I don't see it, so let me just run through it anyway. When alcohol is metabolized, it's broken down by an enzyme. This enzyme, there it is called alcohol dehydrogenase, and it converts the alcohol to another central nervous system depressant called acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde is converted by aldehyde hydrogenase to acetic acid, and it goes through this breakdown process, step, until it's finally eliminated as H2O in water with trace acetates in it. And it's the trace acetates usually that they find in the urine. If you're given a urine test and bust out for alcohol, it's because they find acetone or fingernail polish remover in your urine. You're just a little chemical plant all on your own, aren't you? And so this is about breaking a dangerous chemical down into a less dangerous chemical, into a less dangerous chemical, and eliminating it. Of course, there are things that we metabolize that don't break down to a less dangerous chemical. They break down to a chemical that's in a less amount, for instance. If you like to drink and take cocaine together, if you like to do these two drugs together, then your body will create a third substance in that metabolic process that's known as cocanol or cocaethylene. This drug, this active metabolite, which is a drug in itself, is more powerful than either of the parent drugs, alcohol or cocaine, but is found in a much lesser amount because the parent drugs are breaking down at a rate where it can accumulate and it passes out relatively harmlessly. If you're doing magic mushrooms, fall off in a cow pasture somewhere and go to picking the psilocybin mushrooms that you want to ingest. The psilocybin is a powerful hallucinogen in itself, of course, but when your body begins to break it down, the first stage active metabolite of psilocybin is psilocin, which is an even more powerful hallucinogenic drug. If you are doing heroin, heroin is created by adding two acetyl molecules to the two acetyl groups to a morphine molecule, and then it becomes diacetylmorphone, and that becomes heroin. Which is all fine and good, but once you stick it in you and your body begins to break it down, the first stage active metabolite of heroin is morphine, which is a powerful narcotic in itself. So metabolism is an important process to understand if you're going to understand intoxication. It's an important process to understand if you want to understand about what could go wrong, for instance, with drinking methyl alcohol, so that if you're drinking methanol, your first stage metabolite isn't acetaldehyde, it's formaldehyde. And your second stage metabolite is an acetic acid, it's formic acid. And that changes the whole experience for you. It's much more dangerous when those are breaking down into some fairly heavy toxins. Also, if you understand metabolism and the stages that you go through drinking alcohol, then you can understand how antabuse or disulfiram works. Disulfiram blocks the enzyme aldehyde hydrogenase. That's the one that breaks down the acetaldehyde. So if I give someone who drinks some antabuse, they're going to get sick as hell. And they're going to get sick as hell because when they drink with that antabuse in the system, it interrupts the metabolic process. It does not allow the aldehyde hydrogenase to break down the acetaldehyde into acetic acid, and you get a sudden buildup of acetaldehyde, and it makes you sick. Good to know, huh? So never wash your antabuse down with whiskey. It's not a good idea. When you're drinking and taking other drugs too, alcohol, you shouldn't do this. Alcohol screws with the process of metabolizing things like penicillin or dilantin or these types of things, so that these drugs are metabolized more rapidly because of the presence of alcohol and the way it's kind of increasing the activity of the microsomal ethanol's oxidization system, which is, as we've talked about before, the cytochrome P450, the enzymes that break these substances down. There's some signs of alcohol poisoning for you. The effects of alcohol, behavioral effects, as you have an accumulation of symptomologies that are associated with alcohol ingestion that are, frankly, they're symptomologies of having been poisoned. If someone slipped you a Mickey that consisted of diethylene glycol or antifreeze, and you're drinking this stuff and it poisons your kidneys and things will happen to you, you'll stagger around, lose control of your bodily functions, you lose your coordination, you'll slur your words, you'll pass out, you'll die. Sounds kind of like being drunk, doesn't it? And it is kind of like being drunk. So when you're drinking this low-grade poison ethanol, you begin to have lowered alertness, and you're disinhibited, so you feel a little better. And you have impaired judgment. You say and do silly, stupid, sometimes unacceptable things that get you into trouble. That's around 0.05. If you double that, then your reaction times are slower, and you have reduced motor functioning. You can't do things as well. You reach for your drink, and instead of grabbing it, you slap it off the table. Less caution. You're beginning to be a little bit toasty now. By the time you get up to 0.15, large increase, consistent increases in reaction time. It's not safe for you to drive. Actually, it's not really even safe for you to walk. By the time you get up to 0.20, marked depression in sensory and motor capability. You're clearly intoxicated. You stagger when you walk. You slur your words. You drop your cigarette. Knock over your drink. Sleep with the wrong wife. All kinds of silly things. At 0.25 are severe motor disturbances. At 0.30, stuporous but conscious, no comprehension of what's going on, just kind of looking like the Yo Quiero Taco Bell dog, you know, with the bobblehead in the back of the window. By 0.35, surgical anesthesia, minimal level, causing death. You can die at that point. And at 0.40, which is less than 0.5%, of course, is mortality level. Many of the effects experienced by drinkers are based on what they expect to happen. Expectations play a significant role in an individual's experience when they use a drug, any drug, but including alcohol. You know, while you're under the influence, it's unrealistic to expect you to understand things the way you'd understand if you weren't drinking, to perform tasks the way you would perform tasks if you weren't drinking, to interact with people the way you would interact with people if you weren't drinking. So we've kind of got a national idea that when someone's drinking, it's a timeout. You know, leave them alone. Don't don't do business with them, etc. DWI, you're not going to get out of a class on drug abuse and alcohol without seeing these car crashes here, is a problem. When you with a rising blood alcohol content, then you're a dangerous person on the road. Now, if you get arrested for public intoxication or a DWI, they're probably going to keep you in the jail at least 8 hours, and that's going to give you your body enough time to metabolize the alcohol to the point that you're sober enough or can drive again. So if you get carried in, even if you got the money to pay your fine, you can't bail yourself out. And they won't release your vehicle back to you until after a significant time. When you hear that about 80% of all the fatally injured drivers who have been drinking were male, it sounds like a big difference, and it is. But you have to remember that about 70% of all fatally injured drivers are male, whether they're drinking or not. That might mean that women are better drivers than men. How about that? Younger people are more likely to be injured in alcohol-related crashes. Younger males particularly. Younger males do kind of nutsy things, you know. We like to have a few drinks in us and drive too fast and do crazy stuff like that because that's who we are. And then we die at larger rates. As one of the reasons that you get higher insurance rates when you're doing that. Driving and doing activities like swimming, boating, etc., like that, all of which alcohol use increases your risk of accidents and injuries and fatalities, aren't the only things that we do goofily. Sexual behavior is also influenced by drinking. And when you're drinking, occasionally you sleep with ugly people or people that you otherwise shouldn't be fooling around with. When you're clean and sober and you decide to have a sexual encounter with someone that isn't a regular partner and you don't know well, it might be a good idea. You might realize it's a good idea to use protection. For instance, a condom, so that you won't pass diseases back and forth. But when you're intoxicated and you don't have a condom, what the hell, right? Human sexuality is complex enough without throwing drugs into the mix. But people who are under the influence, even if they are practicing risk reduction sexual behavior using condoms and non-oxynol 9 spermicide and things like that, we have other issues going on. Men particularly, guys who are heavy into using alcohol may have brewer's droop, where the spirit's willing but the flesh won't cooperate. And we can't get or maintain an erection long enough to achieve, to complete the sex act. Or on the other extreme, we may have a condition called priapism, where you have an erection and it stays there and it's for long protracted periods of time, but it's painful and you can't achieve orgasm. So people are frustrated. Even under the best case scenario, if you're having sex with someone who's blotto and been drinking all night, you're probably having sex with a sloppy, inattentive lover who doesn't much care what you're getting out of it. So it can be frustrating for everyone concerned. Drinking alcohol can also produce alcohol-induced periods of amnesia. This is retrograde amnesia. It's known as blackouts. And when you have a blackout, you have a current inability to remember what happened while you were under the influence during your last drinking episode. And that can be a problem. And you know, for people who don't have issues with booze or with other drugs, you know, if I were every time I went to McDonald's and got some French fries and I had a blackout, it would scare the hell out of me. That would be it. I wouldn't drink anymore. If I went to McDonald's and got some French fries, and on my way home, the police pulled me over and dragged me out of my car and kicked my French fries up and down the road and bounced me off the concrete a couple of times and talked bad about my mama and gave me a DUFF, driving under the influence of French fries. That would be my last French fry. But with a drug that I'm investing in is becoming more and more important to me, I find a way to rationalize what is really weird consequences of my drinking, you know, and I find a way to make it okay or to rationalize it to where it could happen to anybody, right? There's a great deal of hoop-de-doo about crime, violent crime, particularly associated with drugs out there. And we're afraid of crackheads and heroin addicts and drug dealers and all of this kind of good stuff. But all of those people rolled up into one big nasty ball are not as likely to injure you as someone who is drunk. The drug that is most always related to violence is alcohol, is assault, physical assault. You don't have to be a psychic to predict a fight in a beer joint on Saturday night, do you? Because people are there, their driving behavior's been altered by the drugs that they're consuming. They're aggressive in every way that there is to be aggressive. Their inhibitions are down, their judgment's warped, and trouble ensues. If you're murdered in the United States of America, chances are really good it's not going to be a stranger who kills you. It'll be someone that you know, someone that you're acquainted with, someone you may even be related to, maybe a partner in a relationship. And one or both of you will probably be under the influence of a drug, and that drug, more than likely, will be ethyl alcohol. If you're raped in the United States of America, it probably won't be by a stranger. It will be someone you know, maybe someone you're related to. and chances are real good one or both of you will be under the influence of alcohol. If you go out on a date and that date includes drinking and drug use, your chances of being raped go up through the roof. People who kill themselves are more likely to use alcohol before they make the suicidal attempt than not. And I'm not saying alcoholics here. I'm saying anyone. If people are going to jump off the Hartman Bridge, they'll probably have a few drinks before they do it. That's just data. Physiological effects. And we talk about this a lot. Chapter 6, loosening the grip, right? Peripheral circulation, fluid balance, hormonal effects, judgment, long-term brain injury, etc., and so forth. All of these are affected by the use of ethyl alcohol. Alcohol toxicity is something that we have to take into account too. When you're intoxicated, look at that word, intoxicated. Toxic means poison. Intoxicated means exhibiting symptomologies of having been poisoned. And that's what you look like, that's what you act like, because that's what's really happened. And if you drink a whole lot of alcohol really fast, it can depress your central nervous system equally fast. And then the next thing you know, you're down. And it also depresses the part of the brain that controls breathing. So you're more likely to die in a respiratory arrest. But you can also die in a secondary way, which is you pass out, and that is not going to sleep, by the way. That's an alcohol-induced coma. You pass out, you vomit, and you drown in the vomit. And that's a very glamorous way to go, too. Generally, you die through misadventure or poor judgment. A kid I knew when I was a lot younger decided to swim the San Jacinto River at Magnolia Bend, and he said he bet he could do it, and another guy said, I bet you can't. And Pat proved to him that he was wrong. He swam the San Jacinto River. Then he tried to swim back, and that's the last we ever saw of him till his funeral. Anyway, that's the way you die. You get in an argument with someone who pulls a gun on you, and you say you don't have the balls, and boom, guess who did? And away you go. So overdoing it with alcohol, either from a direct toxic effect or from an indirect behavioral effect, risk goes up for you. Hangovers, love them, don't you? I like the German word for it, Katzenjammer, the wailing of cats. Stonato for the Italians, cul de bois for the French. All of them painting nasty pictures of what's going on with you. You've had too much to drink. Hangover symptoms, some people refer to as acute withdrawal that are associated with a particular drinking episode. So that anytime you drink, there are consequences, physiological consequences. It doesn't matter how much. If you're swallowing alcohol, there are physiological consequences to swallowing that alcohol. Most of the time, it's not so much, and we can put up with it. When you have a hangover today, generally what you have is irritability, a headache, an upset stomach, a belly burn, dehydration, and things like that. For some people, and I'm one of them, I always had horrible hangovers, so I would begin drinking early the day after a binge so that I wouldn't feel so bad, but then that's just kind of prolonging the inevitable. Chronic disease states, things that can happen to you over time as you drink, brain damage, cerebral atrophy, Wernicke's syndrome, Korsakoff psychosis, alcoholic dementia. All of these things happen after you keep insulting the brain over and over again. Epilepsy. People can drink themselves and drug themselves too into epilepsies. If you did away with alcohol and drug abuse, you'd do away with 7 out of 10 cases of epilepsy in adults. It's a deal. Liver disorders, cirrhosis, and you can see the healthy liver on the left here and the cirrhotic liver on the right. You do away with alcohol use and you do away with most cirrhosis. You can get cirrhosis from things like hepatitis C, you can get cirrhosis from drug abuse, you can get cirrhosis from other types of liver disease or injuries. But generally speaking, most cirrhosis in our country comes from swilling good old alcohol. Cirrhosis is, by the way, is a Greek word. It simply means scarring. And you can see what healthy tissue looks like and what scarred tissue looks like. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this looks pretty much like a dissected piece of liver. This is the insides of the liver and not the outsides of the liver. And you can see the damage that's taken place. And you need a certain amount of functional liver area in order to exist, in order to keep alive. And once you your liver can't do that anymore, then when it goes, you go. Heart disease, cancer, the immune system are all affected by alcohol use. And people who drink, for instance, are more likely to catch a communicable disease than people who don't drink. If you're injured or you're ill and you're a drinker, particularly combined with tobacco use too, if you smoke and drink, it's going to take you longer to recover from a broken bone, from a cut, that kind of things. It will be a longer process for you. Fetal alcohol syndrome is the leading cause of preventable mental retardation probably in the whole world, certainly in the United States. And this condition, you can see this young man here, is called solely, no other reason than the mother is drinking while she's pregnant. She's drinking while she's carrying the child. And you can have fetal alcohol effect, which is a not as serious consequence of maternal drinking, or you can have fetal alcohol syndrome, which is a more serious consequence, or you can have fetal death. The child's born but doesn't survive it. May have withdrawal syndromes. First thing they have to do, and that's a pretty rotten deal if the first job you have on this life is to kick your mother's addiction, So there's growth retardation occurring before and after birth. Abnormal features. You can see this young man looks a little bit like a Down syndrome person. He's not. It's fetal alcohol syndrome, but it resembles it, what we used to call Mongolism. Because there's sort of an Asiatic feature to the eyes. They're got a high forehead and the narrow epicanthic folds around the eyes. And then you have the philtrum is flattened out here, the little dimple between the nose and the mouth. And there's just a dysmorphic appearance about his face. If you look at him, you look again, These features can be seen in the absence of alcohol exposure and other types of conditions, but they're also symptomologies of fetal alcohol syndrome. And the thing that the key to recognizing fetal alcohol syndrome is knowing that the mother drank during her pregnancy. And dads don't have anything to do with it. It doesn't matter if dad was drunk or not. Now, this may matter in some other conditions, but not in FAS, FAE. Alcohol is a drug. You can become physically dependent upon it as a central nervous system depressant. When you decide to detox from alcohol, you may have withdrawal syndrome. And withdrawal syndrome will progress through stages. Stage 1's tremors, quick heartbeat, hypertension, your blood pressure's up, heavy sweating, loss of appetite, and insomnia. This is common as dirt in treatment centers and halfway houses, things like that. Or people like me who sobered up in a motel room in Port Hueneme, California, you know. So all of that happened. Stage 2 doesn't happen for everyone. Stage 2 is hallucinations. This is where you're hearing things, seeing things, feeling coke bugs crawling around under your skin, or a combination of those things, or smelling things, having olfactory symptoms. And this is serious withdrawal that you're getting into when you're doing stage 2. Stage 3 is delusions. That's believing things. People are out to get you. That sort of thing. Disorientation, not knowing who you are, where you are, when you are, things like that. Delirium, making absolutely no sense with people. And sometimes it comes and goes, and sometimes it's followed by amnesia. People don't remember that they've done this stuff. And in stage 4 is seizure activity. Medical treatment is usually sought in stage 1 or 2, and they do a fairly rapid intervention with a sedative drug. If you're in a hospital and start an alcohol withdrawal, they'll give you what they call a yellow bag or a banana bag. And it will have so called because of the potassium that's in it, gives it a yellow color. And it's normal saline with a lot of potassium and some other goodies in there, as well as a good healthy dose of Librium or diazepam, so that you don't go into stage 3 and 4. The old term delirium tremens is used to refer for severe cases that includes at least stage 3. And sometimes all of this stuff will be referred to as DTs, particularly beginning with stage 2. DTs are also referred to by the old terms rum fits or the horrors because they're pretty nasty, and a lot of people lose control of their bladder and bowels. They vomit all over the place. They, have convulsions, scream, cry, carry on. It's pretty nasty and pretty dramatic. And 1 in 5 of them, if they're not treated, if you don't do some kind of medical intervention, they will die withdrawing from alcohol. Alcohol is a dangerous drug to withdraw from, and terribly hard on your body. Alcohol use disorder is one of the more common of the substance use disorders, probably the most common of the substance use disorders. I don't know. I might hesitate to say that because of tobacco and tobacco products. But anyway, there's lots of things that you can do for an alcohol use disorder. And there are many types of treatments and approaches in order to help people overcome that. But first you have to diagnose it. And to diagnose it, you go to the DSM-5, and the DSM-5 has all of the diagnostic criteria that will help you recognize and define the problem and place it in a categorical in a category that is identifies it in terms of its severity. And there we are. Wow, that was fast, huh? I suppose it was. So, says Bushart smart-assedly, are there any questions? Probably. It's not a very complicated chapter, to tell you the truth. It covers this one particular drug fairly adequately to give you an overview of what you're looking at. But if you're looking at it in terms of is it in depth? No, it's not. We could do, and we do, as a matter of fact, in DAAC 1319, a whole semester on pretty much alcohol, period, right? But for our purposes right now, this chapter is fine. And I will see you next round in chapter 10. So have a good rest of the week. Bye.